Hello and welcome to another episode of Cooking with Bryson. I am joined by our very first baker. So this is going to be Baking with Bryson. Asterisk, Bryson doesn't know how to bake. So this one is definitely, we're going to be following Keenan's lead. I will be providing humorous examples of what not to do when baking. I suspect that the final pictures, particularly since this is a very artistic recipe, the difference between those two will be quite stark. So consider me the comic relief throughout with both my food and personality throughout this. But on a positive note, because we are always in the spirit of the show, trying to help people get better in the kitchen, we are also trying to get back to the community. So our charity for this week is Women's Cyberjutsu. And there will be a match of a TBD amount, courtesy of the work that Keenan has been doing. So as always, put your questions in the Q&A during the episode, and I will get to them as we are going. Keenan, take us away.
All right, are you guys ready to have some fun? Because this is really, really a lot of fun. So I see that Bryson has already made his cake and it looks like he's put some icing on it. I was giving him a hard time just now because I'm not sure what he iced it with because we haven't got to that part yet in the recipe, but that's okay. So the first thing that we're gonna start off doing is actually making the buttercream icing. So I'm gonna shift over here and it might be a little bit difficult to see. So you can move this along with me. There we go. So you're going to take the confectioner sugar that you had, it's about 4 cups, and you're going to put it in your mixing bowl. By the way, this is the messiest part of all of this. And you're going to go ahead and add your 2 sticks of semi-soft melted butter in here. I happen to go with like just cooled melted butter because I think it tastes better. And then we're going to go ahead and start mixing this. Now, if you're at home and you're using a KitchenAid, very, very important step here. If you've ever used confectioner sugar before, you know it just goes everywhere. So I'm actually going to cover it up with a towel so that it doesn't fly off all over the things. We're going to put it on the high setting and let it go for a few minutes. You can see the powder escaping from the side. Okay. Now I'm going to leave that go for a few minutes, and I'm going to go ahead and pull out the cake that I kind of pre-made. Okay, so for your frosting, let me get some help from Princess Leia here. If you look inside here right now, everything is mixed together very well, but it's still kind of chunky. So you want this to be really, really smooth so that when you're putting it over the cake, it's really easy to frost. And even though the first frosting always looks a little bit hectic, as long as it's smooth-ish, you won't have a problem putting the second coat on. But we need to get that a little bit more soft. So we're going to add just a little sploosh of milk. Sploosh. Technical term. Sploosh. And we're going to let it go for another second.
So does your apron make you Darth Baker?
It does. Yep.
Well, while you're doing that, you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Mixer.
Oh, I was saying while you're doing that, you can tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do?
Oh, So before that, this is more like it. This is like kind of a almost whip that we've got going on here, but we're not quite done with the mixing, so I'm not going to tell you about myself just yet because it's going to get loud for another second. If you have the watermelon flavoring that was in the recipe, this stuff is really, really good to read here. We're just going to put a couple of drops in here so that we can get a little bit of watermelon flavor, right? Just a little, okay, that was probably too much, but that's okay. Now, for this recipe, usually when I've made this one before, I also put kind of watermelon juice straight from a watermelon in it. But the watermelon juice is really temperamental. So I wanted to do it with just the flavoring today so that the cakes that you're making at home are awesome. So we'll give it a mix. I think you could probably talk her into this.
Okay. Well, I know several of you were with us at GrimCon today, so thank you for coming on over to this. For those of you that you are new to this, every week we have a different guest come into the kitchen. We publish the recipes a week in advance, and they are all over the place. They are everything you can imagine, from mirror glazed cakes to oyster appetizers to we did really nice bacon crusted pork loin, all the way to diet friendly dinners. We're going to be doing a seafood paella next week with Janine Frederick. So the idea is we publish the ingredients in advance. Some of them that take a little bit longer because we want to keep the episodes shorter. We give you a little bit of homework to do the cooking at, and then we'll walk you through it. Usually I'm a bit more involved, but apparently I got one step ahead, and I, again, don't know what I'm doing.
Okay, so I went ahead and I made my cake and got it all ready, but I made like a huge cutting mistake and it kind of fell apart. But I wanted to demonstrate this for those of you who are baking at home because it's kind of, it happens all the time, right? So you get your cake out and you really want it to have kind of an even flat surface. So you cut that muffin top off and kind of chuck it to the side. Yeah, like that. Well, while I was cutting my cake, my second one, this happens. So all of that cake is right here. Like, it's a lot of cake that was cut woefully, but it doesn't matter. So I left it like that because I want to show you guys that the power of the frosting is amazing. It's like the power of the force, okay? It's gonna forcefully put this whole thing together, and we're gonna make art with it. So if you got your cake,
is there a professional way to successfully cut the muffin top off?
There is. I just don't like it. So if you're a true professional, you can do this just by hand and really not have to worry about it, but I'm not, so as you can see. So there's this tool that you can get that kind of fits over the cake, and you use the knife and kind of go through here. But what I found is these things are movable, so it doesn't really help with the evening out, because if you're not like right eye level with it and like perfectly analyzing it, it's not going to come out straight either. So it's better to just try with a good bread knife or serrated knife so that you can get in there. So here. Now we're going to start with our first layer. Oh wait, hold that thought. Something that I do, and I don't know if Kellen's on, but I really wanted him to kind of see this. The use of Crisco is crucial for all kinds of baking, especially cupcakes. Even if you have a cupcake paper inside the pan, always put some kind of vegetable oil or something in there so that it is super easy to take out, whether it's in something or whether it's not in something. So I have these little pieces of parchment paper on the bottom of my cake. I'm going to use the smaller piece for the bottom and then kind of put the larger piece on top of that. So I'm going to go ahead and just start frosting this area. Now, what's interesting about this, hold on, let me switch over here, is that I know as a perfectionist myself, I typically want this to be like so perfect and like no crumbs and no weirdness kind of happening in here. But the fact of the matter is that that's really impossible. On your first part of kind of frosting the cake, it's going to have little crumbs in it. It's going to be uneven. It's going to be bumpy. It's not going to be perfect. So we're just going to put this on here as best as we can, and then we're going to pop it in the freezer so that it can chill for a minute. Also, if you're not licking your fingers while you're cooking or baking, you're doing it wrong. All right, so I'm going to try to build it up on this side so it's a little bit heavier. Okay. Now this is where my anal retentiveness like really gets the best of me, because I can sit and do this part of it for like a really, really long time. Okay, well, we've got that in the middle. And now we're gonna actually flip this over and we're gonna put the other cut side inside. So now here, I gotta do some, no, you're bigger. Some evening out, kind of squishing it down a little bit. And now we can start frosting with the rest of the frosting. So now we can talk if you want while we're doing the frosting.
Yeah, no, now I get it. So that's how the top of the cake always has like that perfect symmetry, because it's the part that cooked on the bottom. And because you use the parchment paper, you're guaranteed to get a clean pull.
Exactly. Exactly. You know what
I know. I just learned something. I now know why cakes always come out so perfect. Now I understand the secret. I was wondering why we did two parts, because I was just like, I'm only gonna do one part because it's just me and Emma, so I can't eat that much cake. And now I get it. There was a part of me that wanted to like cut like it in like pieces. I was like trying to figure out like how I would stack it. So I've now learned something. So Keenan, why don't you quickly give an introduction of who you are and what you do?
So hi, I'm Keenan Skelly, and I bake cakes, and occasionally I do really cool stuff in cybersecurity, usually with gamification. One of my current projects is actually using gamification to really help the cyber security awareness market, and specifically the human attack surface problem that we have right now. I mean, it's just, it was already a huge problem, and of course you guys know that now with COVID, it's even worse. So we're really trying to come up with unique ways to deal with that problem. Sorry, I've never talked while frosting before. I didn't realize that was going to be a problem.
It requires that much concentration?
No, it doesn't. It just requires that much anal retentiveness.
Ah, okay. So you also have a really interesting background. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of your first jobs and what you used to do after those interesting jobs and other interesting jobs?
Yeah, so I actually started life out as an EOD tech in the United States Army. Really great job. You get to blow stuff up and hang out with the president at the same time, and they're totally okay with that, which is really interesting. While I was there, I happened to be at the White House during 9/11 as the EOD team assigned to the White House. And I got a very up close and personal view of kind of the national response plan and how everything is acted out. So when DHS actually stood up, I really wanted to be a part of that. And I went ahead and got a job over there. And I ran a program called the Comprehensive Review Program, which actually looks at all critical infrastructure. And we did vulnerability assessments, personal, information security that we called it then, and physical, and we would go break into nuclear power plants and chemical facilities. And one of the biggest things that we saw then was that information security was one of the biggest single points of failure, no matter what it was. So we're going to take a break for a second, and my horribly frosted cake is now going to go into the freezer. Hold that thought.
We'll hear more when she comes back from pen testing the freezer with her cake.
So now we're going to switch over to this side of the kitchen and do some mirror glazing. This should be fun. Yeah, so while I was at DHS, working a lot on that program, what we discovered is that information security is a single point of failure no matter what the piece of critical infrastructure was. And it was really a challenge then to get owners and operators the kind of training and equipment that they needed, because if you're running a nuclear power plant or a chemical power plant, you don't necessarily have money to throw away on upgrading systems and patching and all of those types of things. So I thought I would go get a degree in information technology and security and figure out some cool ways to address that problem. And now we're gonna go ahead and turn our burner onto high. Let that go for a second. Yeah, so where did I leave off? What else did I do? Nothing fun, right?
I don't know. I think being an EOD tech sounds pretty cool.
It was definitely very cool. Best job you can have in the Army. So we're gonna let this heat for a minute. And then we're gonna go ahead and dump in the sugar that was in the recipe.
How much sugar? I didn't have everything measured out. I need help.
You have the recipe, don't you?
I am not able to pull it up right now.
Okay, it's 1/2 cup of sugar. Go ahead and put that in there. You're also gonna go ahead and put
confectioners sugar or regular sugar?
Regular sugar.
I ran a whole conference today. This was kind of difficult.
Okay.
So 1/2 cup.
So the sugar, and then you're gonna go ahead and put 3/4 cup of corn syrup in. This right here, this is what makes everything so messy and also pretty glazy. This and the combination of the gelatin. So, then we're going to put about 60 milliliters of cold water into the pot with it. Now, as that starts to get cool, you can go ahead and give it a stir so that it's all mixed up. Sorry, there's tri-tip being smoked in the background here. Okay, so give it a stir and then leave it alone for a few minutes so that it can start to boil a little bit. And then we're gonna take the 5 tablespoons or teaspoons, sorry, of gelatin, and we're gonna mix about 100 milliliters of cold water with that.
Five teaspoons of gelatin?
Yes.
I got to figure out how to open the gelatin first.
All right, I give this a little stir.
I got so many new things for my kitchen that I've never had before just for this episode.
That's good.
That's how out of my depth I am.
Okay, so we're gonna stir the gelatin in the water and leave it off to the side for just a second. Now, you can start to see that this is just barely starting to boil. We're gonna let it boil for maybe another 30 seconds, still giving it a good stir so that it doesn't get that sort of layer on top of it. Yeah, I'll get that in a second. Oh yeah, stir this. Okay, and then the next thing that we're gonna put in here are the, let's see, the condensed milk, which is, I believe, a 1/2 cup. Also, I love condensed milk. It's one of my favorite things in the world. When I was living in Africa, it was very rare that they would have it at the store, but when they did, oh my gosh.
Okay, so what do I have to do since I have evaporated milk that's different?
Yeah, if I were you, I would add a little bit extra sugar into the mixture, maybe a half a cup.
Okay.
All right, so we've got that. I'm gonna stir. Now it's really boiling, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn the heat all the way down to low. Stir in that condensed milk until it's really smooth. Okay, then we're gonna check the consistency of our gelatin mixture and make sure that it's really like gunky, not too watery, but definitely gelatinous. And then we're gonna go ahead and put that in here too. So down to the side, go ahead and continue stirring so that everything is very even and kind of put together. I was actually really excited about doing this just because you said that you hadn't made a cake before. And I think that's the best. I just started baking in October, baking these cakes specifically. I was trying to make a Halloween cake for this Halloween party that I was having. And I found this great cake that was on Pinterest, and I kept trying and trying to make it. And every single time was like the worst possible episode of Nailed It. So I kind of started to quit a little bit. And while I was on Pinterest one day, I saw a mirror glaze cake, and I was like in love with it immediately. So I went ahead and bought all the stuff and tried it. And the first one that I did was near perfect. I actually don't think I can get back to as perfect as that one was. And then I found my favorite new cake. So I made the one for Halloween, and I also started just kind of baking them weekly, mostly stress baking because, you know, life is hard and stressful. So whenever you see like 4 or 5 cakes come out in a week, it's been like a crazy week, and I just bake all night because it's like relaxing. Okay, so now once everything is mixed in here, you've got this really, if you can, okay, maybe I'll take the laptop to you. Hold on. You can see that you've got this really nice kind of smooth, perfect glaze going on. And we're about to mess that up a whole lot by throwing 1 1/4 cups of white chocolate chips into this. Now, you can use dark chocolate chips, and most people would be using that for something like a ganache or when you're really focused on the chocolate kind of glaze. But if you want to use all of the colors that we're trying to use, you really have to use the white ones so that you can mix and match with the colors. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put these in here.
Question from Kellen. How much water was supposed to go in the corn syrup plus sugar mixture?
That is 60 milliliters of cold water, and it really needs to be cold. Now you've got the chocolate chips in, you definitely want to continue stirring them. If you look at like a recipe online for how to make the mirror glaze, it's going to tell you that, you know, you should mix this until all of the little bits of chocolate are really, really, really small. And I found that that's actually a terrible thing to tell you because when it's that small, when you go to strain out the chocolate chunks, it actually goes right through the mesh strainer, and then you get really small pieces of chocolate in the glaze that never fully melt. So definitely keep stirring it, but make sure that as we continue with the stirring, that it doesn't get so small, the pieces don't get so small that they can't be filtered. All right, so this is going to take a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and up a little bit, maybe to a 2 or 3, just to go ahead and get that melting. Now, while that is doing its business, we're going to go ahead and pull out the cake from the freezer because we got to give it another coat. Now, for the sake of time, I went ahead and made one in advance that looks like, This is what it kind of should look like after it's been in the freezer for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. It should, you should still be able to see the cake. You're still gonna have these little pieces of cake chunks in there, and that's totally normal because when you put the second layer of icing on, you're gonna be able to make up for a lot of that. So let's go ahead while keeping an eye on our chocolate. This is multitasking at its best. Keeping an eye on the chocolate, go ahead and start to frost the cake with the additional icing.
I'm trying to find my strainers.
Trying to find your what?
The strainer. I don't know where my strainer went. So what happens if you can't strain out the white chocolate?
You're pretty much screwed. Do you have any kind of mesh cloth or anything like that? No. Do you have a regular strainer?
Oh, wait, hold on. I got a little strainer.
That'll work.
Yeah, slowly but surely it'll work.
Keep on stirring here. So I've still got really big chocolate chunks. So I'm just gonna let this heat up a little bit more. You don't want to turn up the heat too much on this, otherwise you're gonna end up with caramel. Stir, let it keep going for a minute and come back.
What exactly are we doing with the white chocolate if we're straining out some of it?
Say that one more time.
So what are we doing with the white chocolate since we're straining out what feels like most of the solids?
So there's enough of the white chocolate in there with that very specific amount, the 1 1/4 cup, that it's okay for probably about a quarter of it to not actually make it into the mix. And after you make these 1 or 2 times, you kind of get a feel for exactly what size they should be, and kind of the level that you're okay, that you're comfortable with. But it does kind of take feeling it. Although I know you've said so many times that bakers don't feel, right? They don't just wing it.
Hey, it's like an inner kitchen rivalry, right?
It is. Okay, so still frosting over here, doing our very best to make this as smooth as possible. This out.
I mean, it seems like a lot of my white chocolate has dissolved.
Okay, then you should probably go ahead and start straining it. And I also need to strain, so I'll get my little guy over here. Another way to tell if it's getting too far is if it starts looking like just a lot of chocolate swirls all the way around the pot, then it's definitely time to strain it. You and you. Sit. And So after you put your second layer of frosting on, this is what your cake should look like. It should be super smooth. It's okay if there's some bumps. It's not totally perfect, but it seems like a pretty normal looking, ultra smooth, perfect cake that, you know, you see on Instagram. So you really want this extra layer here, the second layer, to be fairly frozen before you start putting a glaze on. And the reason for that is the glaze is going to be really hot. When we finally get to the temperature that we want, it's actually going to be at about 99 to 103 degrees. So if you put like a warm frosted cake underneath all of that, it's just going to melt and turn into mush. And I've done that. It's really horrible to watch and disappointing. So definitely make sure that after your second coat, it goes back in the freezer and it's very, very cold before you're ready to frost it. So we're going to set this here for a second. And
so hold on. So my cake should go back in the freezer before I put this hot stuff on it?
100%.
Okay.
Did you frost the whole thing yet?
I frosted the first time, so I was already frosted.
Mine's did the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, as much as I could, mine's so thin, I couldn't really do the sides.
Okay. Let's see. We're going to get rid of it. Okay. Now we're talking. Now we've got something really cool going on here. So don't forget, for those of you who are watching, there was that link available for the Women's Society of Cyber Jiu-Jitsu, a great organization that actually helps women get into cybersecurity. The funding from today's event is actually going to go specifically towards creating additional programs for minority women in cybersecurity. And I think we can all agree that's something that is really important. So now I have the glaze ready, and I'm super excited. It smells delicious. I'm going to be working with two colors, well, three, but two major colors as part of the glaze. And I like to separate the glaze right away into however many color containers I need. It cools a lot faster. If you leave it in this big old chunky thing, it's going to take like 35 minutes to an hour to cool to the right temperature. So I'm going to go ahead and split it up into two smaller bowls so that I can start mixing color. Now, actually back here. Okay, now this might be difficult to actually get in here. Okay, I'm gonna take a minute. How's everybody doing?
Kellen asked one question about timing, but I was able to answer that. I have managed to transfer two things into two cartons. Kellen is a mess, that's what he says. I think mine came out a little bit darker because I did not have clear corn syrup. I had to use the molasses corn syrup because it's COVID, you can only get what's in the store.
Very true. Sometimes you definitely have to make substitutions. The good thing is that baking, you can usually make substitutions pretty well. I actually ran out of corn syrup a couple weeks ago and couldn't find it in the stores, and I substituted with honey, and it turned out very, very good. It was really sweet, but it was very tasty. So now that we have our two little containers here, we're gonna start adding some color. Now I've got green and I've got red, and then we're gonna leave the black off to the side. So let's start getting that color. And what I like to do is actually pull out or have an example of what the colors are that I'm trying to get to. That way I can really conceptualize it. So I went ahead and I brought a little watermelon so that we can kind of play with it and see what happens. All right, so I'm going to start with the green. Now for the green color, what's really interesting about what my kind of vision was for this cake is I wanted the green to really have that like almost like swirly multicolor dark and bright green mixed in it. So when you put the green food coloring in, we're not going to mix it up all the way. We're just going to give it like a little twirl and leave it like that. So there's still going to be white pieces in there, and that's totally okay. Even as it cools, it's going to kind of move on its own, but we're going to be stirring it regularly to keep it from having that sort of top sheen on it. Now for the red, this one was a little bit tricky when I did it before. You're going to mix the red in, but be very careful with the red when you put it in, because it can go dark and crimson very quickly, and that's not what we want. We want it to be kind of this bright pinky red. So we're still going to stir it. And because we're mixing it with white, it's going to get some of that pink already. Now, I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is actually almost perfect. Perfect. Love it. Okay. Now, this is where the thermometer piece comes in, and really making sure that you have everything at the right temperature. Because if you put the glaze on the cake and it's too hot, it's literally just going to melt through everything and eat your cake alive, and it'll fall apart in front of you. And that's really depressing. I've done it many times. So you have to make sure that the glaze is at about 99 to 103 degrees when you actually put it on the cake. So I've got one of these because I have almost exactly the same amount in each one. I don't need a thermometer for both of them. I just need a thermometer to one so that we can start tracking where that's at. Now, more multitasking. So if you've got the watermelon squares, I went ahead and put mine in the freezer so that they can get nice and hard. And now I'm gonna like sprinkle them with sugar and put them back in the freezer, because these are gonna be the nice little garnish on the side of the cake. So let me get some sugar. Regular sugar, not confectioners, confectioner sugar. And we'll just give it a little.
I'm gonna put all mine in a bag and shake them and then throw it in the freezer.
Oh, that's a good idea. Except that the watermelon juice is probably going to absorb the sugar before it freezes.
Oh.
They actually don't have to be in the freezer for very long, so give them a little soak, get that watermelon sugar vibe. Watermelon sugar. And throw them back in. Okay. You, and I don't need you. I usually keep a couple of just butter knives around so that I can keep stirring occasionally. Now remember, like with the green, you don't want to stir it all the way in. You just want to keep it from having that glazed, cooled glaze layer on top of it. Typically, this is where I start doing a lot of the cleanup, but we can save that for later. How are you doing?
I think I'm at close to temperature.
Oh, really? Wow, that's amazing. Okay.
I mean, mine aren't that hot. They were in the around 100.
Okay, so you should probably still wait a few minutes to make sure that your icing is cold enough. What temperature are they at?
Yeah, no, I definitely don't think my cake is cold enough.
Yeah. So this usually is about 5 to 10 minutes of just kind of chilling and watching and making sure that it's ready to go. Oh, so set up for the actual glazing procedure. Nobody's allowed to laugh at my short person problems. You need to get a step stool there. It's not working though. Okay. No. Too hot. I'm gonna go right here for a second. Also, I've never had a computer near where I was doing any of this, and I can tell you that I have a lot of mirror glaze on my computer right now. That I'll tell you about later.
So my trick for the computer is I actually prop it up on something and it's like down and out.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's nothing else here. It's just space. So for the setup, when we're trying to do the actual glazing of the cake, you need to have, I tend to use a lot of parchment paper kind of on the bottom here, so that cleanup is super easy. Then you're also going to want something for the glaze to pour into. In this case, I've got just a little Pyrex thing underneath this little cooling rack. And then any kind of cooling rack that you might have, lay that over the top of it. And that's going to make it easier for the glaze to kind of roll off into the other pan. It's also going to make it a little bit easier as you're trying to make the kind of design that you want. Let's see if we can. So my glaze is still at about 127. How's everybody else doing? Anybody burn the house down yet?
I don't think they would be responding on the poll if they did.
That's actually a fair point. Another interesting thing that you can do with the glaze, and I actually do this a lot because I make them all the time, is once you've kind of gotten it down to whatever temperature, the 99 to 103, if you find that your cake still isn't ready, then you can always leave this off to the side and let it cool completely down. But then you can put it in a microwave for roughly 28 to 30 seconds, and it will bring it up to almost exactly the right temperature. So then you only have to wait a few seconds or a few minutes for it to get to the right spot. Yeah, I totally have green mirror glaze all over my computer.
So where else are you going to go on your baking journey?
Nowhere, just feeding all my friends and neighbors.
So continuing to produce cake after cake, mirror glaze after mirror glaze, nothing else has caught you.
Yeah, I've been thinking recently about doing multi-tiered. So far, I've only had, kind of a one-tier cake. I've had different sizes. I've had like really, really giant ones that look like awards, and then kind of the standard 6x6 that I do. But I'd like to do, for Halloween, actually this year, I'd like to do a 3-tiered cake that has multiple different types of glaze art on each one of them. So I'm kind of already planning that. Should be fun.
So I can already tell you that since my icing is not as smooth as it's supposed to be for the foundation, that I think I'm actually going to come out with a pretty good looking mirror glaze, but it's not going to be as pristinely even like a mirror, but it will be reflective. I think I'm on path for that at least.
Good. I always do the photograph after I'm done with the cake where everybody just can see my hair, so you could see that it is totally a mirror. And I think you should do that now, like with the bowl. take the picture.
Just with the bowl. Am I supposed to be able to see myself in the, oh, I can see myself in the bowl.
Success.
Hey, how about that? I really didn't think it was going to turn out that well.
Gotta have faith.
Oh, it wasn't a question of faith. It was, I think, just baking is precise. I mean, getting this all is very much about getting it just right to achieve that perfect look, which I think, as you mentioned multiple times, your anal retentive nature is what kind of like brought a sort of like zen to like the way that you were achieving that symmetry. I work completely the opposite in the kitchen. I really like just feeling my food and just sort of throwing at it, and I don't have to be perfect, and I don't have to like, I just kind of know what to do, and I go through it, and boom, dinner. But part of that is also I'm not experienced at baking, so there are a lot of things obviously that you as an expert just can fly right through, and you've learned a lot of little edges of what works and what doesn't. So I'm just on the beginning of my journey.
So how are you feeling about that journey so far? Because I feel like you're not digging it.
I just really want to see what this looks like when we put it all together. That's mostly what is occupying my brain right now, is going like, okay, like that looks pretty good over there. The cake in the freezer definitely looks like a first time cake. What happens when I throw the two together?
Oh man, so I've had some epic cake fails, like really, truly epic. One, actually this past New Year's, I was at a friend's house up in Winter Park, Colorado, and it was his birthday. And so I thought I would go ahead and make a mirror glazed cake for him. And, but it had to be gluten-free. And something that I didn't take into account at all was the altitude, which is wildly different than cooking on the East Coast, wildly different. And it literally like just fell up. It had white, kind of a white frosting on top of it, and it just fell apart into like chaos. And somebody made the comment, because he's a big climber, he's done Everest a couple of times. So somebody made the comment that it looked like the ice falls. So we put little toothpicks in it, so it looked like they were crossing over. That was an epic fail, epic fail. I also, the one I did, I think 2 weeks ago, the skull, who I've named Horatio, looked so good when I first did it. It was like pristine and perfect. And I put it inside the little cookie stand or cake stand, and I put the thing on top of it. And I woke up the next morning and I came down, and the whole thing had like tipped over into the glass, and Horatio's poor face was like this. That was also an epic fail. But yes, you have to kind of break a lot of cakes to make a cake. So don't forget to keep giving your glaze a stir.
I'm nervous about stirring the green one.
Yeah, don't over stir the green one.
Well,
Definitely.
the problem is, like, it looks like it's already turning like green.
It's okay, because we're gonna do something really cool with the black once we start the actual glazing process, and that'll help kind of mix up the green a little bit too.
Okay.
Okay. I'm actually kind of excited I have all of this leftover cut cake. It's pretty tasty. So how was the con today?
It was good. We had about 1,100 people registered, which was a lot. Certainly nobody does conferences over the summer, because in normal world, everybody's taking vacations with their family. And that's one of the reasons we actually thought to do this, is there's still a lot of folks locked down on pandemic. So it's kind of like a dead space. Nobody plans conferences during this time. So we just figured we'd slot something in between. And that's why we picked the next one of December 30th, because it's the same kind of thing, is no matter what situation is, that's usually like a dead time of the year. So, and then of course all the talks are recorded, just like all of these shows are recorded, so everybody can get to them when they are able to.
Sweet. How frozen is your cake?
I don't know how to answer that. I know it's cold to the touch. Like I poke it and it feels hard, but it's still a little springy. Like it's not like this, it's more like little give.
Okay, yeah, leave it. Leave it.
Okay.
It should be a solid crust.
Oh, there's like a crust around it. Like I can feel the crust, but I don't know how hard I'm pushing or not pushing. I mean, it's cake.
Noted. And what's the temp of your glaze?
I mean, it's warmish.
Okay. So I'm just about at temperature. I'm going to start the glazing process. I'm going to grab my thoroughly frozen cake out of the freezer.
I'm gonna grab possibly thoroughly frozen cake out of the freezer.
Like I could throw this at somebody right now and injure them. Okay, I'm going to grab my black coloring and have it sitting kind of right here with me. So now you can do this in a couple of ways, and I do it differently probably every time, just depending on the feel that I'm trying to get for the cake and what exactly I want it to look like. In this case, I want it to be very, very swirly and dramatic, and I want the colors to kind of run in and out of each other. So sometimes if I want it kind of to just do whatever, I'll put them together and just pour them at the same time, and whatever happens, happens. If I want a lot of color pop, which I kind of want with this one, then I'm going to be real careful not to mix the colors too much because I want each of the colors to come through very well. So in this case, I'm going to start with the green, and I'm going to just kind of put random pieces on this side, and maybe just a little bit over here. And as that's bleeding out, I'm going to go ahead and start putting some of the red. Now, what's interesting about this is no matter what you do, it's definitely going to keep running, and it's going to create patterns that you can't necessarily control, and that's totally fine. But just be cognizant of it's what?
It's art.
It is art. It's totally art, and it's fun art. This is a great project to do with your kids too at home, but like all fun art projects, it's super messy. So I really want this green to pop. I'm gonna keep that there. Now I've got still some red left. Oh, I almost forgot. Now I'm gonna take just a drop here and of the black. Not a big, well, that's not working. This is a better one. Okay. So I'm going to take just a drop or so of the black and just put it in maybe a couple places with the green, a couple places with the red as I continue to pour the rest of it. Now what that's going to do is it's going to give it that dark swirl, and it's also kind of representative of the seeds, all right? So this over here, this over here. And this is a fun part. So like make it whatever you want it to look like, right?
It definitely looks like something.
Okay. Let me do here. Now, I would like a little bit more red in mine, and I'm almost out of the red here. So let's see. Excellent. I always have a little bit of pre-made glaze in the refrigerator so that I can pop it in the microwave and use it when I need it. This is red, which is perfect. We'll give it a 30-second boost. And I also want this green to kind of run in and out of the red. You're good. You're good. Put this in here. Go for it. Give it a whirl. Okay.
Should I pop it back in the freezer?
Yeah, you can. So I usually don't put it back in the freezer at this point because it just needs to kind of run, right? But that's why it's super important that the glaze be the right temperature and that the cake be the right temperature. We are, you. Nice. That's pretty cool. Oh, that's not
I
good.
think the colors that drained below it actually look even cooler.
Oh, I love that. That's actually one of my favorite parts too.
Yeah, no, I really like the way it ran underneath even better than it did on the cake. Here, I'll try to bring it up.
Just do some drizzling. Wonderful. Okay, so nice. All the sticky stuff off. Then we'll take a picture. So this is what we're looking like right here.
Wow. Yeah, that looks a lot better than mine.
So I'm loving everything about this. See the richness of the red and the green and the black kind of just popping through every once in a while. Super fun, super yummy. Everybody gives me a hard time because they can always see my kitchen lights in the cake. So there's a good one right there for you of my kitchen lights.
Hold on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get a picture of the two of us with our, this is how I end the episode, is we get the photo of us with our creations.
This could be tricky. Okay. I'm sure I could get in there.
Yeah, this does make mess.
You can see part of me.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
All right, got it.
All right, great. Now, before you eat it, I recommend letting it sit for a couple of hours just so that the glaze can get where it's going to get. After that, I usually don't necessarily refrigerate it. Sometimes I do. It depends on the consistency of the glaze and how it's kind of looking. If it's looking a little bit more runny than it should, then I put it in the refrigerator for a little bit. But this one is looking perfect. It's a slow glaze, so it's going to continue to make really great art and continue to just look really great on the cake. Oh. Come on. Got the fun stuff. So my birthday was earlier in July, and I got this beautiful cake pan from my BFF Sarah. And I definitely want to put this on here and go ahead and add that watermelon garnish that we had in. So when you start to remove it, this gets tricky. I always had Darth Vader with me to help me out. You want to kind of get underneath without getting rid of the cardboard or without really damaging the inside of the cake. So you have to be really, really careful here. So I lift it up a little bit. And this over here. And then there's always the, careful, wait for it. Yes, okay. Okay, hold that thought. Watermelon sugar. Ah, there we go. Now we're cooking.
Ooh.
Ooh, fancy. All right, that's it. Like I said, super messy, but fun, always fun.
Well, thank you for joining us on this episode and teaching me how to bake a cake. And we look forward to all of those who tried this at home. Remember to hashtag us, Chef Ryson, Hacker's Kitchen. And yeah, we want to see, yeah, I definitely want to see what everybody else did, because this is what I ended up with on my first go. Remember to donate if you're feeling generous to Women's Cyber Jitsu, so that we can help make a difference in the world. Next week at 7 o'clock, we have Janine Frederick coming on to teach us how to do a seafood paella. Recipe is already up and posted. I will be much more comfortable with that. Keenan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.